Hello and welcome back to thoughtbot's AI in Focus, the show where we explore AI tools, techniques, how to build them into our products, and how to use them while we develop and design our products. I'm Chad Pytel. I'm the CEO, founder, and a developer at thoughtbot. And it's just me today, but what we're going to do is dive in to something we briefly mentioned 2 weeks ago on the show while we were working in a Claude Skill. If you missed that episode, I did that with Damien Galarza, and we used Claude Skills to do some work on a health tech application. During that episode, we briefly mentioned the idea of using Claude Skills to help us with code quality and code auditing. And that's what we're going to do today, because my colleague, Jose Blanco, who lives in London, took that idea and ran with it in an experiment where he took a lot of the thoughtbot best practices and sort of Rails standards that we strive for in our Rails development and extracted that into a Claude skill to help us with code audits. So we're going to try this out today. We're going to install the skill. We're going to try it out on the application that we often work on this stream, and that's called Hub. It's an internal Rails application that we have at thoughtbot. It's a good test of this. This application has existed for, I believe, 10 years or so in some form or another. So there's a lot of code here. There's a lot of legacy here. And so I'm excited to see the results of having this assistant help us with finding and maintaining code quality. So before we dive into the code, let's take a look at the blog post. So if you don't remember, or if you weren't listening to that stream 2 weeks ago where we used a Claude skill, let's just quickly recap what a Claude skill is. In October of last year, Anthropic added the concept of skills to Claude. It exists. You can use them as Claude on the cloud. Today and at every level of Claude. Today we're going to use it in Claude Code. And these are files on our local computer when we're using Claude Code that define a skill and in a markdown thing, and it has YAML front matter that tells it's essentially if you've done tool calling before, it's almost a way to do like human created tool calling. We define a skill that we want Claude to have, and instead of loading all of the markdown instructions and everything for that skill every time Claude code loads, instead we define a little snippet that says what the skill is for. And then when we encounter something that we're working on that a skill might be relevant for, Claude will either automatically start to use that skill or ask us if we want to use that skill rather, or we can really instruct Claude to use that skill in our task. So you have your top level skill.md file, which describes what a skill is. And then you have a bunch of additional documentation, which can be with further instructions, references, that kind of thing. So when building this code audit skill, we incorporated some documentation based on our thoughtbot's book, Ruby Science. That book is free, 100% free online on the web, and then available in ebook and PDF as a pay what you want model. It contains a lot of really good information about Ruby and Rails best practices and how to make maintainable applications. It's been around for a while, and we updated it a couple years ago. So it's still up to date, and it takes the approach of the idea of code smells, things that don't look quite right in our applications and can hit us as funky as we work, and then solutions to those. Then we have another book, Testing Rails. So it includes a bunch of information about how we test Rails applications. And then, and we're going to look in at these files as well. But then Jose wrote Poro, plain old Ruby object patterns, which includes some best practices that he incorporated from developing Rails applications. And then a security checklist, 12 categories of security issues with detection patterns, and a report template, a structured template for the output of the audit. So I'm starting from scratch. We just have the Rails application checked out on our repo, ready for development. So I don't have the skill installed yet. So let's start there. So we have our instructions here to try it ourselves. We're going to create a Claude Skills directory. If we go over to our editor here, so this is going to be in your home directory at the top level. You can see I have a Claude directory already, a .claude directory already. Includes a bunch of things in it, but you can see it doesn't include a skills directory. So we're going to make that. And then we're going to, the instructions say to clone the Rails audit thoughtbot folder with skill and references. Okay, so we're going to go into our Claude skills directory. And then if we, so this is over here. So we can see it has the README, which is showing here on GitHub. So if we just grab the whole URL and we I wrote checkout instead of clone. I was like, what's going on? So that's going to check out a Rails audit thoughtbot directory within our skills directory. So Claude traverses the skill tree looking for these files. So this is just going to work if we put it in that skills directory as another directory. So then it just says, ask Claude to edit your code. So going back up here, Claude audit. So we're going to go in with some tips and tricks, but let's just jump right in and ask Claude to audit. So we're going to switch back over to so this is we're running this from scratch. So I anticipate that it's gonna take a little bit of time. Let me make this terminal window a little bit bigger. Okay, so it's asking, do I want to proceed with the bundle audit check? So, okay, it's asking if I want to treat it with NPM audit. Oh, where you? So I want to go over and. Okay, so yeah, it sees now it's doing the yarn audit, which is what we want. So as I work here, I'm monitoring the chat. So if you've got any questions or comments along the way, feel free to drop them in. And you can see it's now running a look for any passwords or secrets or anything to be worried about here. While this runs, I'm going to open up a new window for Zed, my editor. And I'm going to open up the skill so we can take a look more at the actual skill files. Give me a sec here. Actually, a better way to do this will be to okay. Okay, let's check in here. So I'm looking at this. I want to see whether the skill is actually being used or if something else is actually happening here. So that's why I am, because I didn't see the prompt I was expecting to see in terms of asking it to run the skill specifically. So let's just go over and take a look at these references here. So here are the things that are in the checklist for to look for: SQL injection, safe alternatives, mass assignment, safe alternatives to the mass assignment, cross-site scripting. What I'm looking for is anything about running bundler audit or those kinds of things. Okay, so it is here. But I'm not yet convinced that that it's actually running that audit. Especially since if we look at the report template, we're expecting to get this particular report out. And this is one of the things you would have seen on the stream 2 weeks ago when we were doing that work to generate documentation in our FDA regulated health app. that we defined a report template format that we wanted for that. So I'm not seeing that. So that's interesting. Let's go back to the blog post and see if we can see. And if you're watching in the, well, Clarissa, that is what we are trying to figure out now, because I did that and it didn't pick up the skill like I was expecting. So, yeah, okay. So the command is a slash command, but you can see it's not. I'm just gonna restart Claude. There we go. It picked it up this time. So to answer your question, it should pick it up automatically. I'm not sure if it was the sequence of events of which I started it or not, but it should pick it up automatically. And then once it's picked up, it's available as a slash command to run it directly. But sort of like tool calling, each skill has that skill.md file, which has this YAML front matter, which provides a name and a description. And then it uses that description to know when it should potentially use the skill when you're not explicitly calling it. And then it should ask you whether you want to use that skill or not. So let's explicitly run the skill now that we've got it properly loaded. Thanks for the question. I appreciate it. Okay, so it's asking whether we want to proceed. I'm going to say yes, allow reading from the references during this session. So I'm going to say yes, since I'm familiar with this and in the interest of keeping things running smoothly. Bundle exec Rails. So one of the things that I recommend doing, and this is one of the tips that I mentioned, is right now I'm running this on the entire code base. You don't need to do that. In fact, if you're just getting started with this, it might be useful to not run it on the entire code base and instead say, oh, I want to look at this particular feature of the application, or this section of the application, or just the models, or just the controllers, or something like that. And you can totally do that. That might be a little bit more manageable if you're just getting started. So let's take another look at that skill again. There's some nice details that instruct Claude. So again, Claude doesn't load anything outside of this YAML front matter until you are using the skill. And this is one of the benefits of skills, is you can have a bunch of them and they don't load into your context all the time unless you're using them. We're being prompted with another thing. Yes, we're going to allow ls commands for this session. So the audit can be run in two modes: full application audit and targeted audit, which is what I was saying. I'm just going to switch back over. So step 2, determine the audit scope is step 1. Step 2 is load reference materials. So loading those reference files. analyzing the code by category. So what we're expecting to happen, and you can see this in the checklist down here, is going through testing coverage and quality, security vulnerabilities, models and databases, controllers, code design and architecture, views and presenters. I generated the audit report, provides some severity definitions, some guidelines for different things we're looking for. This is all in the main skill. And then always save the audit report to mount user data output Rails and present it to that's interesting. It's possible that Jose has hard-coded weird directory there. We'll see how that handles it. So this is all brand new. The blog post was just published a few weeks ago. And it's an interesting experiment. So let's go into those code smells. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger for y'all. So these are all from, like I mentioned, Ruby Science. We have long methods with some descriptions of what we consider long methods, large classes, feature envy, case statement. So we talked about this when we were working with Damien generating the FDA regulated documentation that's required. One of the things that we thought was really interesting about that, and I think this is applicable to this idea of auditing as well, is that it's one thing to do this on a one-time basis. But once we amass all of this information, we could also envision a world where this is actually running as part of our CI run on any change that's being made, and helping us keep style guide, but also a quality guide to the kinds of applications that we want to write. And it's not that we wouldn't be able to override it, just like we wouldn't be able to work with our team on a pull request to make it meet our standards, and that sometimes says this is good enough, or here's why we're doing this a little bit differently. But we can envision doing this as part of CI, which is really interesting to me. So again, if you haven't read Ruby Science, I recommend checking it out. It's free on the web. The whole contents there is at thoughtbot.com/RubyScience. Okay, it looks like it has generated the report. Do you want to create Rails audit report? Yes. Okay, so it's outputting that file. While it does that, okay, there we go. Okay, here's the report. Thoughtbot internal operations platform, hub, Rails version 8.1.2, Ruby version 3.4.8. And the audit scope was the full application. So we have, so this is the different categories: testing, security, models, controllers, code design, and views. We only have one critical severity thing over the entire app. We'll dig in and see what that is. We have 18 high, 17 medium, 7 low, for a total of 43 identified things. Key findings: God class pattern. The person model has 931 lines with 104 public methods, requires aggressive refactoring. This is right. We've identified this previously, and actually, if I remember right, we have worked on the person model on the stream before, and applying other auditing techniques from Rails anti-patterns to that. So it's definitely correct to identify that as a God class. 21 service objects should be refactored to domain models with active model. That's one of the things that Jose included as an opinionated recommendation in the code audit. Missing test coverage. 20 plus models lack corresponding spec files, including critical infrastructure models. We'll dig into that more because I'm not sure that that's right, but we'll see. Okay, strong testing culture. Good architecture patterns. Use of calculators, presenters, and query objects demonstrate thoughtbot best practices. Modern Rails stack. No focus specs. 0 focus tags found in test suite. Prevents accidental CI failures. If you're not familiar with that, I'm going to take a little divergence. If you're not familiar with this idea, in RSpec, you can add a focus tag to a test. And then when you run the base RSpec command, it will only run the focus things. I really recommend against this as a practice, because the reason why is you're changing the test code or the test files. And there's just been too many times where I see that someone doesn't realize that they've focused a bunch of stuff or one thing, and then they accidentally commit that. Worst case, you're doing it locally and you don't realize. Or best case, you're doing it locally and you don't realize. Worst case, you accidentally commit it, and then only a subset of the specs are being run on CI. RSpec has the ability to run based on a line number any set of tests. That's a much better way of focusing your test suite without making sure you don't have collateral damage down the road. Okay, diversion over. Security tooling. Using standard brakeman and follow security best practices in most areas. Okay, so those are the positive observations. See what the testing issues are. RSpec with FactoryBot is the test framework. That's right. 687 total spec files, 254 model files, 34% of models lack specs. So phrasing it this way, I'm not, that might be accurate because we do have comprehensive integration test coverage and a lot of little models that we may not have individual unit tests for. Not that I necessarily recommend that, but it might just be the reality in this application. Missing specs for core infrastructure models, application record, company, day, and finance. Let's take a look at that finance model to see what it actually is. Okay, so it's a plain Ruby object, and it has day assignments, projects. So what this model is used for is to render a page called finance. So this is sort of like a view model object, which is given, instantiated in the controller instead of having to have a bunch of instance variables and given to the view. And then we'll have integration coverage for that. So I'm not saying that's the best approach, but I'm saying that's why there's not unit level model level coverage for this class. So I understand why after digging in. And the process that we're going through here is a typical code audit or review process that we would do, where it's like we're quickly looking to get a lay of the land and explanations for some of the stuff that we might see. Okay, these base classes and critical domain models have no corresponding spec files. The application record base class may contain shared behavior that goes untested. Let's see, application record. Yeah. So, okay, so it's really just looking, does every model have a spec file application record, which is only that. That's interesting. Okay. Recommendation, create spec files with full coverage. Here's the one's company model as an example. Okay. Missing specs for external integration models, calendar event, fresh sales event, escalation. Okay. Potential factory bloat. With 254 models and complex associations, factories may be creating unnecessary data. Factories creating unnecessary associations. So the checks that is doing are looking for factories creating unnecessary associations, factories with greater than 5 default attributes, and name factories for every scenario. That's an anti-pattern. So it's checking to make sure that we don't have that. That's interesting. Recommendation. So that creates unnecessary associations, only required fields. Okay. Controller specs may be missing authorization tests. Large controllers may lack comprehensive authorization specs. Ensure all controller actions test authorization via pundit policies. Potential overuse of let statements. Test readability may suffer from excessive let usage in shared context. Inline test data when it improves readability. So this is really interesting to me because I just did a search for let and it didn't come up at all. So that is interesting to me. While we look at the rest of this, I'm going to say, where are the specific uses of let statements in the spec? Okay, we'll let that run, see what it says. Okay, so we're through the test issues. Okay, it's going to run find statement. So what I actually want to do is I want to look for that critical model 01. Okay, so it said that the critical severity issue that was uncovered in the audit was the God class. That's good to know. Let's see what the security audit uncovered. There's one high level, one medium. So high severity mass assignment with permit, and the anniversaries controller allows mass assignment of all parameters without a whitelist. Anniversaries controller allows mass assignment of all parameters on line 45. I see. That's an interesting thing. I'm not even sure off the top of my head whether this is a problem. I think that it's not, and it's being misread as a problem. So let's talk a little bit about what this is from a Rails perspective. What's happening here is the view is using if the view is filtered, if the index action of the controller is filtered, we want to manifest all of those parameters into the view so that they can be used in URL helpers, again, to maintain all of the filters on the view. That's what's happening here. So it's just blanket seeing that params.permit, and it's highlighting it as a potential high security vulnerability. Curious if you're watching and if you think it's an actual vulnerability, because I don't think it is, because this is not doing a actual action. It's used for filtering of an index search, a search action essentially. But let me know what you think in the chat or in the comments. Okay, let's go back to our audit report. Oh, while anniversary params is currently unused in the controller, having a permit helper method is a dangerous pattern that could accidentally used. Okay, so yeah, even this report is saying it's not actually a problem right now, but it could potentially be a problem, which maybe I should have read to begin with, but there you have it. Okay, SQL injection risk and filter scopes. String interpolation and where clauses could allow SQL injection. Cool. Analysis. These are safe because the user input string is passed as a bound parameter, not interpreted into the SQL string. The percent wildcards are added in Ruby before being passed as a parameter. Current implementation is secure, but document this pattern for future developers. That's interesting. I think when it comes to this audit, so this is a brand new thing we've created. I think one thing I would want to consider is whether that kind of feedback is actually useful in a this is a focused audit kind of environment, but also it's listed as medium severity, but it's not even an actual thing. So I might want to tweak that. And that's one of the cool things about Claude Skills. You can go in, they're just markdown files. And so you can provide new instructions pretty easily. Okay. Let's go over to models. So this is where we have the critical severity with the God class. This is a textbook God class anti-pattern. Right on, Claude. Totally is. The way that it is suggesting that we address this is to extract domain models using composition. So we can say we're going to have a profile object, which has the full name and the display name. Same thing with billing info, available days to availability, and then you extract plain Ruby objects that include active model to those. They take in the person and then they expose those things. That's certainly one. If you're interested in these techniques, we've covered them on the stream before. That's certainly one way to go about addressing this. Okay, so we have another model opportunity. It's 771 lines, 60 public methods. It is the second largest model. It handles too many responsibilities. So the recommendation here is to extract to domain objects. So opportunity is what we use in our CRM for managing our sales pipeline, commenting on things, having discussions as a team. And so it's suggesting extracting these different objects, again, using composition to do it. So, like I said, I think that this is one way. Before going, this is general Rails refactoring best practices tip. Before doing what it says here, I would always look to see whether there's actually, rather than a scoped concept, such as opportunity pipeline, whether there's some larger context above opportunities or alongside of them where it doesn't even need to be composition or extracting a domain object underneath opportunity, but rather alongside of it or even above it. So, and the way that the instructions have been written in this code audit skill, it's specifically orienting towards this, and just general best practice, I would look at something higher level. Clarissa says those skills, Claude rules, always need some refinement, especially as we expose them to different projects. Yeah, definitely. And that's part of why I wanted to explore it on here, so we can start hopefully making this even more useful. Okay. We're getting some similar feedback on these large models. And I think the reason why, like we were saying, so if we go over to the guidance that Jose has built in, for example, for this, so I think it's the combination. There's this guidance about using plain old Ruby objects instead of service objects. I'm skipping over this because this is form objects. So it's unrelated. Then you have the value objects used for values that don't need persistence. Decorators, patterns, calculator query objects. Factoring service objects to plain old Ruby objects. And then, so there's that guidance, and then there's the guidance in this Ruby science stuff is going to guide to, so for the God class, for example, extract classes aggressively, use composition, introduce domain specific objects. So it's specifically guiding Claude to providing those recommendations. Again, they're not inherently wrong, but it might be a little overly prescriptive to every solution. So that's something to keep in mind as we work on this and potentially improve it. Models with callbacks. So this application actually uses callbacks very sparingly given the size of the application. So this application has, what was it? 127 models. There are only 19 models with any callbacks in the whole app. So we generally have limited callbacks to where we've already reviewed it and decided it is the best approach to the problem that we're solving. We've tried to be very judicious about that. But still, it's good to have it as part of our audit, and so we could really continue to groom that as we move along. Okay, so all of these. Okay, here's something that's not just a large model. Missing index detection needed, N+1 queries possible without proper indexes. Run the bullet gem in development to detect missing indexes. That's a good recommendation generally. By coincidence, we're actually doing some N+1 work on this application right now. And so it's a good, it definitely has some, and that's the audit is correct there. So here's a look. Concerns may hide complexity. Yep. Prefer composition over inheritance. We only have a few concerns in the application. That's probably also why it's low severity. See, so this is a tweak I would give to the audit instructions because it says, review any single table inheritance usage for anti-patterns not identified in initial scan. So I think I would add to the skill instructions, don't include things in the report that are nothing or that are not identified as part of the scan. Okay, the events controller. Yeah, this is absolutely right. Knowing this application, it does have too much business logic in the controller. Let's go over and look at that controller so we can see what it looks like. So here's where it's talking about, we have this create action, which is calling some logic, but then it's doing stuff around email notifications and Slack notifications all in the controller. So I'm not surprised to see the audit call that out. You can see it's then propagating updates to things. And this is correct. I mean, like I said, we're avoiding callbacks. So we wouldn't want to move these into callbacks, but there is a point where you're doing the things to avoid callbacks directly in the controller, and it sort of crosses a threshold of, is this really the right place to be having all of this stuff? And I think it's good to call that out in the audit and see whether that's the case. And then finally, there's all this stuff about destroying the events and their signups and all that stuff. So a lot of this stuff, particularly for events, got moved because we have the concept of events and recurring events and all their recurrences. We are trying to avoid callbacks. We're trying to move that stuff out and keep it out of just the central model. And I think the audit is right to identify that this is probably over the threshold of what is reasonable, and that this controller is doing too much, and we should really be looking for ways of improving that. So that's spot on in my opinion. And provide some recommendations for how to do it. It's specifically so this is not a bad way of doing that, is to take that stuff that's happening, that's logic related to the submission of events and what happens after they're created and everything, and moving that into a form object. So that's definitely a pretty decent recommendation, I would say, as a way to deal with this. Those of you who have used like dry RB and that kind of thing, that's another specific gem that can help with these kinds of code smells. Here's another controller with some complex stuff in it. Rescue without specific exception catching. Application controller size. Base controls may contain helper methods that could be extracted. Probably, yeah. Okay, confirmation service, high severity. What it's saying is generic service suffix doesn't describe domain concept. Okay, so we could just call this, okay. So it's suggesting renaming confirmation service to assignment confirmation, which is a domain model thing, and then rewriting it from being a thing that you call notify on to it taking in an assignment and then inheriting from active model and then having this notify if changed method. Okay, I might not write. I think the recommendation is totally valid. I might not write it this way, um, but I think the recommendation is valid. Okay, so this is a similar thing. We have a contact enrichment service, and it's suggesting we extract a contact enrichment model. So again, I would prefer, if I'm going to do this, which I think is a valid pattern and a solution to this problem, I would go one step further. These methods wouldn't be called enrich. The point is we're trying to extract a domain object that works like active model. And so I would be looking to call these methods save, something like that, so that this code looks as close as possible to what people expect from active model. But otherwise, I think the direction is headed. And, if I were to see this code, it wouldn't be the end of the world, but I think it could be pushed a little bit further in terms of the best practices that I would recommend. So for those of you just joining, we have written, Jose at thoughtbot has written a Claude Skill to take a bunch of thoughtbot and general Rails best practices and generate a code audit report. We've run this on a decade plus Rails application that we maintain and write at thoughtbot for our internal operations. And we're going through the audit report to see what it looks like. And thanks for watching. I'm monitoring the chat. If you've got any best practice recommendations, if you disagree with me, definitely drop those in there or leave comments and I will see them. Okay, so we've got actually this, so we're through this. This application does use service objects as a way to avoid callbacks. And we, as have mentioned, we have the recommendation in this skills audit, in this audit skill, to prefer writing them as domain objects that include active model. So we've got a bunch of these recommendations, basically one for every service object that we have in the application. Okay. Multiple services for external APIs. External service integrations properly namespaced. Good. These are acceptable as is because they're properly namespaced. They wrap external API clients. Cool. No changes required. So now I know I said earlier that as part of the audit, I might tweak the skills to say don't include things when there's nothing to them. But now as I read this, I actually realize there's some value in having this, particularly if the context of your audit is you're looking for at a new code base, is what I'm trying to say. If you're looking at a new code base, you don't know what you don't know about it. You don't know what is good or what is bad. You're not necessarily just looking for the bad things. And so there is value, now that I see this one, in being able to identify as part of the audit report that, check, this is positive, this is no change necessary. I looked for problems here and there were none. I think there's value in that. I think that where there's where it's getting it wrong is labeling this under medium severity and giving it an issue number. Um, that sets the expectation that something is wrong, and it's not at all. It's just the audit skill says issues of this type will be medium severity. And then it's checking and finding that there's not one. So I bet there's a way we could formulate these instructions to say, like, if we look and there's not something there, we want to note these, but we might want to do it on the side or in a different section or something like that. Yeah. Check for feature envy, review models for methods that use collaborator data more than own data. Example pattern to check. Recommendation. Okay, so it didn't even find something specific there. Excellent. There are properly named domain objects. Each one of them is a calculator. No changes needed. This is the right pattern. We did it. Yay. We got it. Okay. HTML safe usage. Something to look at. Presenter usage. 23 presenters. Show proper separation. Good. Continue using presenters. Ensure all complex view logic is extracted. Good. Okay, recommendation summary, quick wins. Fix permit and anniversaries controller, replace with explicit parameter whitelist. Add specs for missing core models. Document SQL injection safety pattern. Run the bullet gem. Audit HTML safe usage. Short term, this sprint month. Okay. Add specs for 10 missing models. Focus on business critical models first. Medium term, next quarter. That's funny framing. Long-term technical debt roadmap. Now, see, this refactor, the person guide class, refactoring, renaming service objects, just in general, I think you're going to have a hard time tackling all of this stuff reasonably in the time recommended in this audit. And I would be more inclined to be pragmatic and really think about more the long-term roadmap, but that's a nitpicky detail. So thank you for the question. What's the purpose of this code audit? Would it be run for a client or as a dev figuring out the app? The context of this audit specifically and the report structure that we've put into the skill is primarily one that you would run as part of providing recommendations, and particularly probably in the context of a client application. But there's certainly value in running it as a dev to figure out the app. What's not here though, Martin, is, and forgive me if that's not how you pronounce your name, I really appreciate the question. If it was specifically a skill for a dev figuring out the app, there's no overall summary of the application, what it does, what it is, what the main domain objects are. So I would probably want to tweak the skill a little bit if that was the primary thing, so to give that high level overview, because that's not really here. Thanks for the question. I appreciate it. Yeah, these are some good recommendations in terms of how to maintain this going forward. And adding them to the CI pipeline. Okay. So let's take a step back here now that we've seen the results. I'm curious whether anyone watching has any thoughts. Even if you're not watching live, definitely feel free to leave comments on the video. But there's a few things. So thoughtbot, actually, we get hired to do code audits of Rails code bases. And one of the things that we would typically do as part of an audit that's not included in here is we would run these things, flay, flog, and we would run them as part of the audit. We would even like run bullet to see whether there are actual N+1 detections. We would run those things, and then we would include them in the context of the audit. And if we didn't find any issues, we would say we ran these things and didn't find any issues. If we did, we would build them into the context of the audit. That could be one way to improve this audit automatically, is to run these things, then feed that in as context to the audit. Everything here is pretty much static analysis, in other words, as opposed to running commands and those kinds of things. Another thing that's not here is, because it's just doing static analysis, never ran the specs or never looked at how much code coverage there actually was by running the specs. That's something that we would typically do as part of our audit service as well, so that we can provide real, much more concrete metrics on code coverage, any areas that don't have coverage, those kinds of things. And we would feed that into the context of the audit and the recommendations we're making. Domain model refactoring example. Oh, okay. So, but overall, I think that this is really promising. This is a large code base. If you weren't here for the beginning of the stream when we ran the audit, it only took about 5 minutes to run the audit. That's one of the benefits, I think, of the static analysis only that it's doing, is that it's going to be pretty quick to run relative to if we were running the full test suite. Full test suite on this application takes about 11 to 13 minutes to run, depending on your computer and other factors like that. So that could be have taken a lot longer if we were to incorporate those tools. But I think that this is really interesting. I think we could benefit from incorporating a few other sources of best practices, like, I'm a little biased, my book, Rails Anti-Patterns. But specifically the reason why is I felt like the recommendations based on the sources that were included here in terms of the plain old Ruby objects and Ruby science really oriented the recommendations to those smaller domain objects using composition. And I think in most real world scenarios, you want to look at potentially wider solutions than that. And it would be good to get some of those alternative potential suggestions in there. But overall, pretty good. I think there is something to continue to push on here. I would encourage you, if you are a Claude user, or you want to try out Claude Code, and you have a Rails application, give it a try. Give us any feedback. This is all available in this blog post on our blog. We'll include this in the notes for this episode. Claude Audits in the Days of AI, a new Claude skill. It's outlined on our blog, and then it's available on GitHub as Rails-audit-thoughtbot. So feel free to leave comments on this on this episode but you can also open issues, pull requests, that kind of thing. So give it a try on your application, see what it comes back with. If you have suggestions for how we can improve the skill itself, these are the places where you can do it. If this code audit turns up a whole bunch of things for your application and you need help solving them, get in touch with us at thoughtbot, thoughtbot.com/hire us. We're ready and waiting to help people improve their Rails applications. We've obviously been using Rails for a long time, and we are equipped to come on and help teams improve them. I think that about does it for today. I'll be back next week. And I think what we're going to try to do next week is some feature development. So I look forward to that. Again, thoughtbot.com/hire us, or just thoughtbot.com and click on the hire us in the upper right-hand corner. Thanks so much for watching and your contributions and your chat. I really appreciate it. Keep in touch and get in touch. I'm Chad Pytel, and we'll see you next time.